We hit 12,000 views on X alone.
Nice.
On the last show?
Yeah, you can go see it up
Wow.
there. We're not fabricating anything. Go look on fucking X.
No, yeah, that's cool. Listen, since we don't do anything and we don't tell anybody when we're going on all the time, it's pretty cool that we're starting to grow this thing. It's cool.
Yeah, collectively we got 60,000 views for the last show, which is
nice.
Wow. Seriously?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Look, the one thing you can't lie about is look at the reels, look at the stories, look at everything.
Yeah.
But yeah. So thank you for your support.
Yeah,
so
thanks, everybody.
Start it up, Zach.
We're ready to rock. Here we go. We're on.
Let's go. Got to get Vinny a headpiece.
You know what? This is interesting because the top two squares have headbands, and then the other have the powerhouse. It's like one of those like psychiatric examinations.
It's like a Rorschach test, the ink blots.
So Vinny, thank you for being on. Like this, we talk about bodybuilding, but we also talk about pretty much nonsense and everything else. And
okay,
one of the things I wanted to ask you, Zach, before when we just started was, I was flipping channels and there's nothing on, right? And I came across the Wild West, like from Wild West movie, like I think it was like Clint Eastwood or whatever. Okay. And did you realize there's two places that they could shower or clean themselves back in the day was in a brothel, right? They had the barrel with the ladle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the water wasn't always fresh.
No, or the river, like right. So think about that, like comparative to like how some people won't go travel without their baby wipes or whatever else. How we demasculinize ourselves as a society over the last hundreds and hundreds of years.
Well, I got to tell you, I feel like if I had to choose between the two, I would pick the brothel just because why not hang out somewhere where something positive might happen?
Well, you know what? People like worried about STDs, but if you had a toothache, you pretty much would die in the Wild West.
Yep. Yeah. They would crack your skull open, and that'd be the end of you. Like they rip it out.
Huge case of dermatitis on everyone.
All right. Listen, welcome, Vinny, we're going to jump in. We're going to talk about it, but we already got a question out of the gate. Thanks, Ray. Let's jump in, because this is what we love to do here. Ray has a question. He says, how the F do you train with an injury? As I get older, this is an issue. I get no help from my doctors. Can you guys please discuss this? Let's do it. I mean,
I can tell you, like, I have 14 anchors throughout both my shoulders. I tore both my rotator off. And, at 57, I can't do what I used to do. So that's the first thing I don't think of or focus on. I don't focus on what I can't. I only focus on what I can do. And I'm limited, and it could be frustrating at times. You see some guys, doing things you used to be able to do. But if you can get the job done with minimal equipment, I mean, 90% of my workouts are machines now, plate loaded or pin loaded, very, very little dumbbells, very little barbells.
And when did you change that though? But when did you decide to switch to that? Was it and it must have been a conscious decision.
So, like earlier, you asked me, like I retired from competing in 2013, and I had my first injury in 2014. And when I started thinking about competing again, I said to my doctor, please put me back together if I ever decide to get on this roller coaster again and, be insane once again and live out of Tupperware. And, the whole thing. So he put me back together, and it was one step at a time. One thing that I realized would across the board, a lot of older guys, they don't get the pump like they used to, and they always chase that, and they try to lift the same kind of weights and same kind of amount of weights. And I had a nice long run with Universal Nutrition and Animal, and I was with them for 18 years. So I rubbed elbows with a lot of the top powerlifters, and that came across the cage at the Arnold. And they taught me a little bit about powerlifting. I powerlifted once. I'm not a powerlifter, but I did it. So I took that kind of education that I adapted to, I learned from those guys. And I applied it to working out and training and using like a 5-rep method and just increasing the weight a little bit, and I mean, it was, I was forced to put my ego at the door. And then slowly I rebuilt myself and I started my sights on thinking of competing. And honestly, I wanted to do the New York Pro one last time. That was it. I just wanted to do that. But I thought, let me try a Masters show. And I did the Masters Baltimore Pro 2 years in a row. And I got my ass kicked. I took dead last. And,
can only go up. You know, you
only go up from there. That's good.
Yeah. So I reached out to first I reached out to, I don't want to say his name, but he's out of Bev's. I reached out to him and I said,
Frank knows what he's talking about. Yeah.
I said, would you help me for the Masters Pittsburgh Pro? And he told me, Vin, I think your better days are behind you.
Ooh,
yeah.
Man.
You can't do it, Rock. You can't do it.
That's stiff, man. That's stiff to say.
He'll knock you into next Tuesday.
So my back was against the wall. I had nobody wanted to help me. And then the second coach out of Bev's, he said, Vin, I don't want to be. He goes, I don't want to be rude or disrespectful, but I don't want to attach my name to you right now because you're on a losing streak.
Whoa!
Whoa!
Wow!
Yeah.
Did you hit?
So,
damn, smackdown.
How do you react to that, though? For real, how do you react to that? Especially if you know the person. What do you say?
Thank you for your honesty.
I did. I said, thanks for your honesty. I'm going to prove you wrong.
Nice.
And you just opened up a fucking can of worms. And the two guys that they each had going into the Masters Pittsburgh Pro, I just set my sights on, I'm going to fucking destroy them. And I ended up winning the over 50 and the over 40. And now I've won 8 Masters Pro shows.
On the way out of Bev's, did you get in your Ferrari? And, there's no easy way out.
Now I was on my motorcycle. I took my helmet off and threw it after the statue.
Yeah, I like that.
So when you there's a couple things I want to jump into with that, but to avoid the injuries, you're saying just be willing to adapt and be willing to not live in the past and kind of understand how your body operates and evolves and maybe even breaks down if you're going to be punishing it for this long. But I mean, it says something that you're now still competing and you have 14 pins. So it can be done. You can do it.
You can. It can be done. So you guys are quoting movies from Rocky and stuff. You ever see the movie with Vinny Pazienza?
Good
for this.
movie. Yeah.
It was a great. And it was one of the movies that like kind of inspired me. And there's one scene where reporter is asking him, Vinny, what's the biggest lie they told you? And his answer was that it's that easy. And she said, oh, they said it's not that easy? He goes, no, it is that easy. I said, as bodybuilders, we complicate things. And now, I mean, Frank and John, we all grew up in an era where we had 2 or 3 guys in the gym to throw our thoughts at, like when we competed or we got ready for something to get in shape.
Right.
We didn't have social media. We didn't have 1,000 comments and, the way they operate today where somebody could just look on Instagram all day long and the idea can change 5 times in a matter of an hour. We didn't have that. So, I just went about it as like, what did I learn from back in the day? How do I apply it? It's really simple. It's not that hard. And that was it. I mean, I didn't put too much emphasis into like, I can't do this. I just knew I could do it. And it wasn't.
Vinny Paz was a good dude, man. He used to go out with Debbie Halo back in the day, the fitness model. Yeah,
really? He was a name from the past.
Yeah, he was a good dude. But John, what do you think about injuries and stuff?
Well, as the oldest guy here on the panel by a lot, I can tell you that Vinny is absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, there is you come to a fork in the road almost, where it's like you have to decide: am I going to keep doing? It's actually more than a fork; it's more than 2 directions. You either have to decide quit, number 1, number 2, keep going until you break. Or 3, try to augment the way you train to adapt to the current, situation. Look, there's no getting around it. As you get older, you get weaker. Your your muscle mass wants to go away. You got to like really fight to keep it. Your appetite changes, your metabolism changes, your propensity for injuries increases. It's completely different. I noticed it right around the 50-yard line. Once you go past 50, things really start magnifying in terms of effect on, your body. And like Vinny said, you got to adapt. You got to change the way you train. You have to focus on a lot more on form and less on poundage. And you have to train smart. And if you don't, you're not going to make it. You're going to get hurt. And Vinny right there is proof that you can take a waning physique with age and recombinate everything and come back and start winning.
Yeah.
So, you can't fight the system. You got to adapt. And if you don't adapt, you're going to die.
Every athlete has to have a come to Jesus moment where they're like, look,
Absolutely.
I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s. I am like, you feel like you can't be destroyed, like you're a superhero. But look, man, as you get older and as you age, there's a difference between training hurt and training injured.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big difference. Okay. Everybody's gonna have aches and pains and this and that. He's injured, man. 14 pins and what have you.
Yeah, geez.
However, as a bodybuilder, you could chase that, I used to lift this and I used to look like that, but it's never, ever going to happen. Jay Cutler tried to come back. All these bodybuilders come back. You are never, ever going to reclaim what you once looked like. However, as you compete as a Masters, the level of competition goes down. So no longer do you have to compete against Ronnie Coleman. You're competing against other people who actually were also hurt or injured or just like, a percentage of what they used to be. But you can only be the best that you can be. You coming out of like 14 pins in your shoulders and coming back is miraculous.
That's insane. That's incredible.
You going into a gym or this or that, you're going to be better than 95% of the guys at the upper, except for the top guys. So, I mean, I think everybody needs to adapt their program as they get older, and people just don't want to do it. And that's when you see guys in slings who are trying to bench 405 at 50 years old, doing jiu-jitsu, and they're taking 800 milligrams of test every week, and they're under the bench, and they don't realize that their tendons and ligaments are as brittle, are really brittle and stuff, and that they're gonna tear, no matter how big they get. It's just inevitable. So. I mean, you're smart doing the fives. And I also do fives too as well. I'll do a compound movement, 5 sets. Sometimes I'll do rest pauses with the fives, and then I'll do more high reps, drop sets and stuff. But I always throw that one compound movement in there. And even if it's on a Smith machine, Vinny, I'm not going on the bench press anymore. And I'm like, pull it back.
Yeah.
But,
it also.
Go ahead, man. Sorry. I was going to say we got another question, but we'll wrap this one up so we can make sure we got everything.
I was just going to say, it's a mindset, and for me too, like I had to put things in perspective about how I trained, and I found 5 reps was a sweet spot, and it got me to maybe challenge a little heavier weight. We're not talking super heavy weight, just a little heavier. And the whole I'm coming from the 212 division. Now I'm going to compete in the Masters division. And that was a mind fuck too. I know what I used to do, and I know what I used to compete in. And I'm not that guy anymore. And so I had to wrestle with that a little bit too. But once I wrestled with that and figured it out and said, you know what, I got a new lane and I'm going to milk it for the best that I can. And I was thinking about maybe this year was going to be my last year, actually last year. But I'll say this real quick about competing. I just watched the documentary on Phil Heath, and I thought that was amazing the way they did it. And Steve Weinberger said something that just really hit home for me, and I got emotional when he said it. He said, "Some guys win a few pro shows, and when they get to the Olympia, they shit their pants." And, right?
That's about right.
That happened to me last year when I got to the Masters Olympia. I'll be the first to admit it. I was not ready for that. Like you could say like, oh, you've been doing this for 40 years, but I couldn't, I didn't handle the all day text messages that were coming in. How you feel? How do you look? You're going to win this. How do you feel? Is this prep better than the last prep? And I'm like, oh my God, I can't shut this off. And I shit my pants when I got backstage at the Masters Olympia. And I'm grateful that I have the energy to compete still and want to compete. So I'm going to do the Masters Pro World in September. And hopefully, God willing, I get invited again next year when they have it in 2025. And I won't let that happen again. I won't let that slip.
Romano, when are you going to jump on stage and do a master show? Come on, man.
It's funny that you say that because
wait,
just no,
breaking news.
No, don't get your hopes up. It's in the gym. It's like people watch me train and they go, why don't you do a Masters show? You're going to compete again? And they go, fuck no. Why would I do that? And it's like I'm like the polar opposite of Vinny here because I'm trying to do the least. You know, it's like I was leg pressing the other day. I had 8 plates on each side on the leg press, and I did like, I don't know, 7, 8 reps, and I locked it. And a buddy of mine comes over. He says, "You want to put another plate on there?" I go, no. Why? Why do I need another plate? You know, so it's no. I'm not going to compete. I'm not going to lift. I think I have found actually. My sweet spot. It's like I'm interested in longevity. I want to keep training till like another 20 or 30 years. So I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to put myself in a situation that's going to set me back. I don't want to deal with a setback. I just want to keep going at my pace now, stay nice and lean, and leave it at that. I don't need to prove anything.
You know what's funny, Zach? It's Hani Rambard wanted to train me for men's physique. To come back to men's physique. And I'm like, and then other guys, once you do classic, I go, I was a bodybuilder. I was 270 pounds on stage. Where am I going into the classic physique? I look like I was like, whatever. But and then I was at the show and someone's like, I'll sponsor you. We'll give you like, how much do you need? 10,000 a month? I'm like, but it's like, that's why I have respect for Vinny because Vinny's got the passion for competing.
Yeah.
I don't have the passion for competing. I have the passion for training. I don't have the passion. I have the passion to be the best I can be and educate people and this and that, but I don't have the passion to compete anymore. I didn't like it back in the 90s, or I would have kept doing it. And I respect everybody who does it because it's one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do in your life.
And this is the first time in my career that I do not have any paying sponsors. I'm doing this on. I don't have anybody helping me financially. I don't have a sponsor. I have nothing. So, I mean, back in the day.
So how different is that? And how much, if you've always had a sponsor before, how different is it now? Like, how much are you like, holy shit, I'm having to put out a lot more money than I remember that I thought I would have to.
Well, and it's more now than it used to be.
Yeah. Well, I was with Universal Nutrition for 18 years and a couple other supplement companies in between. And I never had to pay for a show, never had to pay for anything, travel expenses, nothing. So when I first came back, I thought realistically, let me do the Masters Baltimore Pro because I could drive to it. I'm not gonna train for this thing, and I haven't stepped on stage in at the time 7 years. I'm like, I don't know how this is gonna play out. So when I decided to do the Masters Pittsburgh Pro in 2019, I just really thought it was a stepping stone to see if I could get myself in shape and then go to the New York Pro and I would be done. But then we had the pandemic and things didn't work out that way.
Right.
So, but I'm okay. I mean, it is what it is. It's like, I'm finally okay. I'm older now. I did well with money and, I'm not like spending money I don't have. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't spend it. I wouldn't do it.
Right. Okay. This isn't to like, to supplement any, this is just a passion. This isn't about creating a second career. No.
Hey man, if anybody wants to sponsor me, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Get him at vinnygalante.com.
There's his Instagram, and that's the one that wasn't hacked. He told me off air that he was hacked. I can't believe it. But I do believe it, but I'm just saying.
I want to say this though at this point, that the point you brought up about passion, Frankie, that is absolutely so vital to why you're doing what you're doing. And it's not just bodybuilding. I mean, it's whatever you do. If you do anything, painting, cooking, I don't know, whatever you do, if you have a passion for it, then the espousing the benefits or your results, or competing or entering a contest or doing whatever it is irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. You feed off the passion that you have for what you're doing, and then nothing else matters. And I know people that have almost zero passion in their life for anything. They just are kind of blah about everything. These people are not living full lives, you know? You have to exercise that passion, and it becomes extremely fulfilling.
You have to be all in. You can't be half in, half out when you're doing a bodybuilding show.
Exactly.
You have to be all in, because the degree of separation for winning and losing for the top 5 is so minute that you're going to lose. So if you don't bring, unless you're a genetic god of some sort, you know, like, you got to have that passion to do everything you can. And that's on a daily basis, you know, with diet, with training, with sleep, with everything. Everything is, you know, everything's a part of that. And people don't get that. They're like, oh, I got abs. No, it's not.
More than that.
You can look. People, I call doing a show being exposed too, because if you're in the gym and you're wearing a tank top and you look great, blah, 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 okay, you can't see your weak points. But when you take everything off and you're doing your quarter turns, you're exposed. Yep. Oh, you didn't do, oh, so I see you've been doing biceps. We haven't done hamstrings in 20 years. Like, you know, like, oh, okay. You know, like, you're exposed. So putting yourself out there and being judged by everybody is not for everyone.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say, Frank, to build on that was, how easy would it be to become obsessed with fixing every weak point, right? Like because everything could then perceive to be weak, because not everything is going to look great every day. I don't even know mentally how you like get yourself into that zone.
That's why we all have body dysmorphia as a bodybuilder. How could you not?
Right.
You know, like, it's funny, when I was on Howard Stern show and I was rating the girls who were good for Playboy, they're like, what do you think? And I'm like, and I saw it recently. I'm like, yeah, she needs more calves. What? You know what I'm saying? Like, what? You know what I mean? Like, you start thinking in terms of that kind of, like, you know, of the industry, of competing. Like, yeah, you become like, you know, unless you could look like have a 4-pack or a 4-pack, and you're like, oh, I can't go to the beach because I need that 6-pack because everybody's looking at me. It's a whole, right? It's a mental fuck.
That's the thing that delineates between looking good and looking like shit. If you're not going to compete, you're just in the gym in a tank top, you look great. You know, people compliment you all the time. Then you say, oh, I'm going to compete. Then you look like shit because all of the flaws come out, you know. So you go from looking great to looking like shit just because you decided to compete.
You used to see bodybuilders like Vic Richards and these guys in tank tops and in, like, you know, Venice Beach, and you're like, oh my God, look at the size. And back in the day, like Earl Fox and people like that, and you're like, look at the thickness, and oh my God. And then they step on stage and you're like, whoa, wow. You know, like, and then you see somebody like Leah Brada, who didn't look much like anything in the gym, and then step on stage, you look like a Greek god. You're like, wow. You know, like, so.
All right, let's go to there was a question a while back. Sorry, I forgot your name, but let's go for it. It was where was it? All right. It says, "What's your take on SARMs?" We've talked about this before, but I think this is a good segue to say. What's your take on SARMs? I'm 48 and have a hard time getting motivated in the gym. My 20-year-old son uses, I'm going to butcher. Is it RAD 140 or RAD? How do you even say it?
RAD 140.
Okay, all right. I don't know. RAD 140, RAD 140, whatever. And says I should do it also. I mean, look, I'm sure you guys get these questions a lot, right? And it seems like these are awfully tough to field when you know nothing about these folks. But I'm still kind of confused over the differences between SARMs and peptides. I really am. I don't understand them, but in this case, if this person's having a hard time getting motivated for the gym, would this be an option that you'd say, sure, go for it? No. Okay, John says no.
I think no matter what you choose, anabolic steroids to SARMs to peptides, it can never be the main player.
Right.
Your nutrition and training has to be the main player in the whole scheme. And then, go ahead, John.
No, I just want to laud you at that point. Yes, it's the drugs. Everybody's got this idea that drugs have this gigantic influence on what you look like, and they don't. If you plotted everything, I've said this a million times. If you plotted everything that goes into getting in shape on a pie chart, and you had diet, your supplements, training, rest, all of those slices of the pie that equal the whole thing, drugs would be a tiny sliver, 15, 20% maybe. Okay, that's the extent of it. Everything else is what counts. And that's not to say that drugs don't make a difference. They obviously make a difference. But then when you get this question about SARMs, peptides, secretagogues, precursors, prohormones, all of that is designed to work around the fact that anabolic steroids and growth hormone are the backbone drug cycle that you should be considering. All of the other shit is not as good. And if you want to play with stuff like peptides and SARMs that we have very little information on, very little medical study, very little proof of anything, major side effects we're not aware of yet, it's just dumb. Take the stuff that we know works, that's cheap, readily available, and functional. And then, but that in and of itself is not the motivation to go to the gym. You got to get motivated because you have a passion for training, right? So drugs, get the idea out of your head that drugs are going to do anything for you, and just focus on what definitely works. And the drugs are an adjunct to help you recover, help you do that little, extra 15, 20%. Otherwise, you're fooling yourself.
Yeah, but Latimer didn't have. Latimer got pushed back in the program when he was off the sauce.
Sorry.
He got carried into the
well, there's always outliers, right?
Go ahead, Vinny. Like, did you have a follow up? Because I'm curious about this too. I don't have, and just so you know, and I probably say this too often to these guys, I don't have a big background in this, so I learn about this through these questions and through these answers, as well as looking things up later.
I've had the opportunity to have the best of both worlds in a sense. With back in the day, nothing was fake, and today,
yeah, that's a big issue, right?
But to go back to the peptides for 1 second, whenever I had a tweak, an injury, I could say 100% BPC 157 and TB 500 help with inflammation and recovery. So I recommend those two. I personally have used them. Anything else, I know nothing about. We hear a lot of times where today, like, guys put down, say, an anabolic like Anavar and say, oh, it's for bikini girls. Well, I remember my first time I ever did anything was Nandrolone and Anavar, and I looked like a freak at 22 years old. And I kind of got caught up in that. Like, I'm not going to use Anavar because they're saying today it's not good. And fast forward now in my 50s, and I'm able to have things readily available for me through TRT, because there's some things that you can get, like Anavar, Nandrolone, testosterone. And I use those 3 products for 2 of my shows. And it didn't look any different than, I'm going to be honest with you, I'll be really very open here. Using Tren, using Masterone from a UGL source. I thought the Anavar and the Nandrolone gave me the same exact or maybe a little bit better look because I come in drier and harder with it.
There's always been this thing, Vinny, where people believe the misconception is that these bodybuilders, are taking tons and tons of stuff to look a certain way. And it's not, I mean, there are the exceptions, but your body's like a sponge. You can only take that much. You know what I mean? Like if you're taking 12 different things, like I've known guys who had laundry lists of stuff, taking stuff. And it's like, and then another guy's taking testosterone, primobolan, and, some Anavar. And look tremendous, and the other guy's taking growth hormone, IGF-1, PNP, like all this other stuff on top of it, and the other guy's kicking his ass in the show you just don't need that much stuff.
I just think a lot of people lose their mind a little bit and think, they're getting their information from the wrong sources and wrong people who don't. We're living in a world where, and I don't mean any disrespect, but it's so many people who don't know anything about bodybuilding teaching people who don't know anything about bodybuilding.
True that.
No, we just that's a reoccurring theme around here is that happens. But so do you think in one sense, are you saying that people just make it over complex? Like it's just maybe step back and narrow it down rather than think you have to take all of these things. Maybe, and we talk about this a lot too, get your blood work done, see where you're at, and then kind of add things in slow rather than just like, oh, well, people say this works, so let's try it. Or people say that doesn't work, so I can't touch that.
Another thing, I'm sorry, go ahead, Vinny.
I was going to say real quick, we're living in an era where coaches need to sell their idea. And they need to be the master of what they know. And they don't have that much experience, but they're very good car salesmen. And where things get dicey because you don't really have the experience. You only read it online. You don't know what the real, what's the term I'm trying to say? They don't have real life experience. Mm-mm. And they're spewing out this information like they know because they're good car salesmen, and they're teaching people who don't know what they're doing. And like I always hear the debate like DECA is the same as Equipose. No, it's not. It's not even close. And try to tell somebody, like, no, Vin, my coach said. I'm like, okay.
Oh God.
Stupid stuff like that.
Vinny, do you notice that as you've gotten older that your body is more sensitive to whatever drugs you do? Because I've noticed it myself that, back in the day I would take, 2,000, 2,500 mgs a week, maybe if you added it all up at the high end, which is not a lot by some standards. But today, I mean, I was off for a long time. When I was like 46, I got my blood work done and noticed that my test was like really low. On 250 milligrams of SIP a week, my level is 1,800 for a test. To get it 1,800, 20 years ago, I'd have to take like 5 grams. Just like, wow. Do you notice that?
Well, who knows? I don't know. I will say this. I can give you a backstory. So this goes back hand in hand what we're saying about having an ego and training the right way and trying to put your ego out the door, right? All right, so 1995, I do the NPC Nationals. I take 5th, having a hard time making the weight class. I never experienced that before. Now I go out to California, do some photo shoots, and I run into, I think I could say his name. I don't think he'd get mad. Chris Cormier. And he's like, talking about prepping and everything, and he said, why do you come off? I'm like, because I only do use it for 12 or 16 weeks before a contest. He says, no, stay on all year. Don't ever come off. So I listened to him. And I was 181 pounds about 4 days out from the Nationals, and I had to make 176. To lose that few pounds made me look like I was skinny, where I was ready at 181.
Right.
So fast forward, of being on for over a year, I'm working with John Perillo, and I'm out in Cincinnati, and I'm doing a photo shoot with him, and he says, "Are you also in town to do the Junior Nationals?" This was 1997 now, so I didn't compete in '96. I haven't been off since '95. Now we're in like June, so I've been on a long time, and I'm like, no, I wasn't planning on doing the Junior Nationals. I'm just because why don't you stay and do the Junior Nationals? It's here in town next Saturday. So I listened to him. I do it. When I got to the weigh-in, I was 181 pounds. I didn't gain any weight. Nothing happened. And so I cleaned myself out after that, and I realized that's not the path for me. That doesn't work for me.
Right.
So I always come off, and I come off for very long periods of time. I'm I'm very lucky because when I take something that works really well on me, and I gravitate towards more of things like, say, Masteron, Primobolan, Anavar. Those work exceptionally well with me. When I take other things like Anadrol, high doses of testosterone, it doesn't do much for me except give me a bloated face. I don't get stronger in the gym. So the myths are debunked in that sense for me. It's like I don't get out of the things that you're supposed to get out of them for me. So did I get off track there?
No, but
no.
But look, let's be honest. It's the guys who are the trainers or contest prep or the gurus, whoever you want to call it. You got to realize back in the day, they were making money off of steroids. So they got 30 clients and they give you a list of stuff that you need to take. Guess what? There's going to be 5 or 6 more drugs on there because they're getting a kickback from whoever they're getting, whoever's selling it to them. So
or they're selling it.
Yeah, or they're selling. So that's why, that was part of the game, because when you heard like, oh, this guy's training this one and this one's this one and like this is what they're on, it was very consistent of what they were doing. I know guys were taking, like John said back in the day, I mean, they were taking at least 10, 12 things at once. And like you, Vinny, the Italian genetic thing, it was like 2 things, 3 things tops,
right.
And then you take 16, 18, 24 weeks off or whatever and what have you. But it's funny, the guys that were back in the day are either dead, who used to do all those drugs stuff. They're either dead or they're like decrepit.
Right.
You go back to the comment you were saying before about you see people in the gym in a tank top and they look great, right? And that's kind of like when I started to think, like, take a really hard look at myself. Like when I'm not in prep, I don't have a 6-pack. I gain my body fat in my midsection and my lower back. Always. But in a tank top, I look like I'm ready to go into a contest.
Sure.
And I started to think like, okay, I look like this. I don't look any fucking different when I'm in shape and when I'm out of shape, except for my
you get lipo.
Yeah.
So that's when I thought, like, I don't need as much as everybody says you need.
No.
And I think a lot of people don't think for themselves. They don't have. There's not a lot of common sense going around when they're picking choices of product that they're going to use for a show and who they're going to work with.
There was a comment that just came in, and I think this is an important thing to tackle here, because they said, "Will TRT? Can I take TRT and will it lead to muscle growth?" It's almost like in that question, it seems like, and it ties into exactly what everybody here is saying. You can't just take anything and expect it to just work. You still have to put in the work. If you want to build muscle, you're going to have to go train. None of this stuff works like some magic potion. And that's where I think people get pulled aside, Vinny, like you said, and Frank said before, about the passion, whether you're competing, whether you want to compete or whether you just want to be in shape or whether you just want to lift a shit ton of weight, you still got to go do it no matter what is in your body. So if you're relying on that, it's not going to work.
Let me add to that, Zach. So I think the word TRT has been so watered down in our generation today, where guys, I'm not taking steroids. I'm just taking TRT. I'm like,
like what?
Like, no, if you're taking 200 milligrams of testosterone, you're on a cycle. I don't care what it is. I don't care about the dose. The dose is irrelevant. If you're 20 years old, you do not need TRT. No. If you're 55, like me, 57, you need TRT. I don't produce the amount of testosterone that I would like to produce at 57. So I take 150 milligrams a week of that in the off season. And for guys thinking like, TRT doses is going to get you big. If you've never taken a steroid, never done anything, and you train and you take 200 milligrams of Cypionate or Enanthate, you're going to get something out of it.
Sure.
And it's not TRT. It's you're on a cycle. Whether your friends in the gym are saying it's TRT or not, you're on a cycle.
I think there's a giant misconception that goes along with that. What people don't understand, a lot of guys don't understand, girls too, is that there's only one reason why your body builds muscle. Only one. And you can't work around it. There's one reason. The only reason why your body builds muscle is to adapt to stress. So the stress being weight in the gym, if you progressively increase the stress, your body adapts by growing muscle. It doesn't grow it for any other reason. In fact, your body doesn't want muscle. Your body wants to get rid of any muscle that you're not using because it's bioactive. You got to feed it. You got to bring blood to it. You got to bring nutrients to it. You have to service it. So if you're not using it, your body doesn't want it. It gets rid of it. Stick your arm in a cast for 6 weeks and see what you pull out. You think you're pulling you got a 20-inch arm going in. You think you got a 20-inch arm coming out? I got news for you. No, you're not. So the only reason, you guys got to get this through your heads. There's no drug, nothing is going to make your body build muscle other than the fact that your body perceives a need for it by the stress it's subjected to. It's an adaptive response. That's it. There's no other reason. Yet there's a cottage industry of workaround to try to disagree with that basic fact of human physiology.
Hey, take me through, like, you make a comeback, right? Mentally, you make a comeback, you come in last. Like, how? Talk me through that. What kept you going? What, really? What was the process? A lot of people, like, I came back, I couldn't do it, and talk about the people around you who were, what they were saying and how you dealt with that.
Well, to be completely transparent with you guys, so my oldest sister is 16 years older than me, and her first daughter was 6 years younger than me, my niece Kristen. And so we grew up together. And in 2015, she developed, or let me even back up. When she was 12 years old, she had a heart transplant. So fast forward in 2015, she had cardiomyopathy, and she needed a heart transplant at the age of 12. And it's funny how you're like, cracking jokes a little bit about Rocky in the beginning, because that is like so home to that hits home, because when back in 2015 she developed melanoma because of the medication she had to take so her body wouldn't reject the heart, caused her body to develop cancer through melanoma. And so she passed away in 2017. And I'll tell you, I always heard people say, oh, I battled cancer, or my dad battled cancer. And I never understood the word battle. And when I watched her, she battled. It was a battle. It literally was a battle. And I had a whole new, different perspective on cancer. And not that I didn't respect it, I didn't understand it. But now that I went through it personally, I understood it. And she fought and fought and fought. And I thought, if I could just take a quarter of her energy and put it into a contest, and I just want to do this one more time. I just want to challenge myself. And I'm thinking, how small is what I want to do compared to what she was putting herself through trying to survive, right? So when I came in dead last, she passed away like a couple of weeks later. And that really hit me hard. And I didn't know if I was going to compete again. It just my wheels were turning. I'm like, oh, no, I got to do this. I can't stop, because she didn't stop. So I did it again. And then that was my pivotal point in trying to make that work. People don't think like I was having like this. A lot of people thought, oh, your career, you had a very nice career. Why don't you just let it go? And it wasn't that. It was like, I wanted to challenge myself, because I felt like if I didn't continue, I was almost letting her down in a way. It was more personal. I never told anybody. This is the first time I'm actually saying this. So watching her go through her battle with cancer, I battled myself in the gym I'm going to fucking figure this out. I don't care if nobody wants to help me. And I reached out to people in the industry. If you remember the name Charles Poliquin before he passed away.
Of course.
Strength coach.
Yeah.
So I reached out to him because I did a seminar once with him and picked his brain. And once I had my right shoulder in a sling, and I was on the phone with him, and he says, "You're going to the gym, right?" I'm like, "No, I can't. I can't work out." He says, "No, go train your left side and train your legs. So what's going to happen is your left side is going to send a message over to your right side to not atrophy as bad." And I thought that was crazy, but I did it anyway because that's Charles Pollock when he was the master, right? So I did it, and fast forward a year later, I tore my left side, and I continued. I trained my right side, and I bounced back quicker than a lot of people thought I was going to bounce back. And I think that's because I got back into the gym. I mean, I'm not going to tell you there was about a 2-month period where Skittles were my dinner. I lost all. I was eating pizza and crap, and I was having a pity party. But once I got back, I was right. So it was on a personal note. Why? I mean, I wanted to compete, and then it was more personal to see, if I can challenge myself like my niece challenged herself.
Oh, cool.
Interesting. Vinny, I guess I want to ask now, since you're at a different spot in your life and in your career, does the advice people come up to, younger folks, does it change now than what it used to be in terms of they're probably asking you questions now that you didn't get when you were competing prior to 2013, when you stopped, when you kind of took the hiatus, right? Honestly, what's the most common thing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I could hear you.
No, quite the opposite. I'm basically invisible now. A lot of these guys and girls, it's true. It's true. I'm invisible. They don't care what I've accomplished. They don't care what I bring to the table. And I have a couple of people that are under my wing, and but for the most part, I like just this morning I'm training, and there's these two guys training, and they made a comment to my client about the level they're at, and they're like, "Right, Vin, you know what I'm talking about?" I'm like, "No." In my head, I'm like, "You're delusional. You've never even been through the trenches of knowing what 300 pounds is like on your back and doing 30 reps, and you don't know what that feels like. You can't equate what you do with what I've done." But a lot of times, no. No, I'm going to say, I would say 95% of people in gyms never approach me to ask me for any advice. And it frustrates the fuck out of me sometimes because I see things done wrong. One thing I don't get, and John, maybe you can answer this question, and I'm open to learning. I see a lot of the guys, they'll do a rowing exercise on their knee. And I'm like, does your lat know you're on your knee? Like, you see this in the gyms. Like,
they're tired.
It goes to what you said before, Vinny, about the trainers, you needing a point of difference, and I think a lot of these idiotic things that we witness in the gym come from their genesis lies in a trainer who's been trying to make a point of difference for themselves. So the more ridiculous things that you see are definitely attached to a trainer trying to make a name for himself.
Oh, 100%.
I'm an Frank. I don't sell myself hard onto people. I just know what I could do, and if they, I don't care to make it. I have the backing to show what I could do. Like I have the history, so I don't need to.
Frank, if it's DMs or if somebody's coming up to you at the gym, what's the most common question that you're asked?
So I was training with a friend a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, "I can't train with you anymore." I go, "Why?" He goes, "You realize," he goes, "I stopped counting the amount of times you took your earbuds out to answer somebody's question." He's like, "You answer?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, you can't be a jerk. You answer." But mostly middle-aged women. Not so much bodybuilders, but it's more it's more about how to get ripped, how to get like a six-pack, how to lose fat is the general like the general questions. It's not about mass, but they're like, oh, like, or the middle-aged guys, middle-aged women asking about, how do you get so vascular, or like, how do I get a six-pack, or stuff like that. But you know what? They're just, you give them the answer, but they're shopping around the answer, the question, so they get the answer that they want. So you're like, what do you like? You just answer basic stuff. I want to lose weight. Okay. Train consistent, eat a good, healthy diet, train like at least 4 or 5 days a week and stay active. Okay.
Right.
You know, like but they want to go to the Nike app and, you know, click in here and, you know, so you just keep it basic. But yeah, I mean, because of Muscle and Fitness, because of my Instagram, I do get a lot of, you know, questions. But, and then it's from the hardcore bodybuilders, Vin, you know, with Bevs, I always get, can I take a look at me in the posing room? And honestly, they don't have any coping skills that we have. They don't have any scar tissue, so they can't take, you know, the truth. You know,
Nope.
like, look at this. Yeah, great. You got no legs. Well, what do you want? What do you want me to say? I'm like, the elephant in the room is you got no leg sweep. Like,
right. Yeah.
you know, like, they don't want to hear that. I'm like, when's the show? And then it's always like a week out from the show. And like, what are you supposed to say? You can't be negative because they can't make any improvements in a week. Like, you know, on their they're not going to put muscle on their shoulders and quads. So you're like, oh, you look great, buddy. You know, keep it up. Hit me up after you're done with the contest, because you don't want to ruin somebody's, you know, prep and blow their mind. Because honestly, the difference is from back in the day, and I don't know if you agree with me, but is the level of conditioning. If you went into a local NPC show, you better have veins in your abs. And Gaspari set the mark back in the day for striated glutes. So you didn't have fat hanging off your ass. At the very least, you had a tight glutes and this and that. So, I mean, like, now you look at somebody and they're posing. There was a guy as tall as me, and I'm like, what are you competing at? He's like, 225. I'm like, 225? I'm like, my first show at 21, I was 240. Like, 225, and I was 21 years. Like, I can't fan him. So it's like, what do you tell him? You got to put on 55 pounds to compete at the, you know, level. So I think that's the big issue right now. Like, the level of conditioning and stuff is just not where it was from back
People
in the
don't suffer. You know, I think back in the day,
correct.
Frank, we didn't like what we did for a contest was the norm, and we didn't look at suffering. We did it, and now how many coaches you hear like, you don't have to suffer for a contest?
No
You
way.
do. You do. I mean, dieting is miserable. The last 3 weeks, you want to rip everybody's head off.
Look, bro, you go backstage at a show, right? And everybody's got their sweatshirts on and they're pumping up at a pro show, and they're like, oh, that guy's not going to do it. How do you know? I'm like, look at his face. I'm like, you know, like, you can see, like, you know, it's like the guys who are like, you know, sucked out and everything. It's like, it's not a coincidence. They're usually the most conditioned people. Like, you know, like, you're not going to, you ever see like Ronnie Coleman backstage at the Olympia? Do you think he could have sprinted down to like 40 yards at that time or whatever? No, he was suffering, man. I mean, just to get through the mandatory poses was you had to suffer, like, you know, and you got off and it was like, you know, you ran a marathon, you're like, oh my God, like, people don't realize what it takes.
No, the suffering is immense. I mean, dieting to that kind of condition is, I've had clients that have spanned the gamut of occupations, doctors, lawyers, you name it. I've had them. And every single one of them has told me that the hardest thing they ever did in their life was not pass the bar or go to medical school or get through their residency. Not every one of them said the hardest thing they ever did was get ready for a show.
Yeah, I had a light heavyweight friend, and he had terrible genetics back in the day, but he got in condition, and he was always in the top 4 or 5, you know, in these NPC shows where there was much genetically superior guys, but he held his own, because when you're a judge and you're looking straight up, what are you looking at first? You're looking at people's abs and midsections, and when you're marking off, and there's 35 guys in a class, you're like, number 7, number 14, number 21, like, you know what I'm like, in that guy, and as soon as they turn to the side and the guy's guts hanging over or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's very easy to knock out an entire group of people because they're not conditioned.
So here's what Samson says to this. He's adding, he says, the guys, quote, back in the day, end quote, were nowhere near as big as they are today, and therefore getting as cut/conditioned is tougher/impossible. What do you what's your take on that, Vinny?
I think that if you took Lee Haney at his worst, which he was never in bad condition, he would be in the top 3 of the Mr. Olympia today. No one can stand next to him in the width of his back, the thickness of his back, the depth of his chest, the sweeping quads, the tiny waist. Sorry if I'm going to make some haters here, but he would expose weaknesses. He would show how many weaknesses there are on competitors today. Today, also, guys have to stand a certain way to create. You notice guys stand with their feet really, really wide today. Yeah. And what does that do? That creates an X factor, an illusion that their waist is smaller than it really is. But if you took the guys today and made them stand like how Paul DeMeo stood and have their heels together and toes out a little bit, you would see enormous amounts of blocky waist. And not many back in the 90s and 2000s had blocky waist. I think after Dorian Yates came on the scene, I think a lot of people thought, oh, I want to emulate that look. And then it kind of like people just took things a little too far, and they weren't meant to be that kind of physique. And they didn't understand what lane they should be in. And no, I think the guys are eating a lot more food today. A lot more things are going into their system. I think we don't realize we don't need as much food as guys think we need. I remember talking to Jay Cutler, and maybe you guys know this better than I do, but he had said something about how much protein he eats. And I was surprised at how little he ate because of being such a big guy. And he said, you have to use common sense. Because I tried this 12, 16 ounces of protein per meal, and it didn't do anything but give me indigestion and a bloated gut. And I do the same thing. I don't eat any more than 6 ounces of protein per meal. Yeah. Because more than that doesn't make me feel very well. I don't digest my food very well. So I think like people are just doing whatever they need to do because they think that they're doing what they hear other people are doing and not using their own common sense to say, wait a minute, I can get this job done a different way. You know?
If you take the top 5, if you get the time machine out, Samson, and you put NASA El Somebody, okay? Throw NASA El Somebody up there, Dennis Wolf, Marcus Rule, Ronnie Coleman, they will dwarf everybody on stage except for Big Ramy. Yep. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. Like
that's
those
absolute truth.
And then even Akeem Albrecht, if you want to, you start bringing up obscure names of guys who are just big competitors, like, you know, that it wouldn't even be close. Dorian Yates too. Forget it. I mean, those guys were huge. You don't realize how big they were. If you have Derek Lunsford, you have Hardy Chopin. Okay, now put Derek Lunsford. Now put Ronnie Coleman on one end, Marcel Somebody on the other, and even Kevin Levrone at his own. I mean, come on, it's not even close.
All right, we do have one request. Natalia, she wants to see your arms.
She always wants to see us naked.
She wants to see. She's at. I could say if you prefer, maybe Instagram is the way to go. But I don't know. Yeah, she's asking.
Show the forearm, dude.
You got to follow him then. So you got to follow him.
Yeah,
that's the deal.
You just have to settle for Frankie's arm.
I don't want mine. Show him the forearm.
There you go. There it is. All right, now you got to follow him. We're gonna be looking. We're following up, Natalia. All right, see.
Yeah.
I do follow up though. When she asks me, who was the last person that was like, no, like she was like, come on, let's take off your shirt. It's like, yo,
Natalia, just log on to the OnlyFans page. Everybody's got. I mean, you know, I'm sure Vinny's got one.
You know what? We should start a caps no cap.
No, look, glad we could make your day. Listen, now hopefully Vinny has another follower now, and hopefully he's got a handful. Everybody make sure you go check out his Instagram and also mastersmuscle.com. And when's your next competition? What are you going to do next?
The Masters Pro World, September 1st.
September 1st. All right. So between now and then, can you just walk me through your schedule, how things are going to ramp up and how you're going to be preparing? Because you have some time, but not a lot of time, right?
So John will respect this. John, you probably will remember this. Frank too. So I read this article I'm talking a long, long time ago. Now I'm a horrible dieter, and I don't do very well just turning it on a Monday and just start dieting. I'm not good. So I read this article that was in Flex magazine with Joe Weider talking about he recommends a transition phase into your pre-contest phase. And I thought that made a lot of sense to me, because if I can ease into prep and go over a period of time and then turn it into a prep, that'll be easier. So I start out at 20 weeks out, and my transition phase will start 20 weeks out up until 13 weeks out. So that 13 to 20 week period is all about cleaning the diet up, making sure I'm getting my meals in, making sure I bring my food with me, because we can have a tendency when we're not training for a show to leave the house and not bring a meal with us. So I make sure if I'm going to be out, I bring a meal so I don't miss anything, or if I'm late for a meal. I make sure that the weekends are starting to be a lot cleaner. If I go out to dinner, I make sure I order something grilled. I don't order, chicken quesadilla. I order grilled chicken. And while everyone else is enjoying themselves, I don't really, I'm not one of these people like, oh my God, don't eat that in front of me. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. So then at 12 weeks out, around 13 weeks out, I start to look at how many grams of carbs am I taking in? What's my kind of average? And usually it's anywhere in the ballpark of about 300 grams a day. And at 12 weeks out, I start rotating my carbohydrates, where I do Monday and Tuesday, 100 grams each day. And then Wednesday to Friday, Wednesday to Saturday, I do 300 grams each day. And then Sundays, I do 400 grams. I increase it. And that works really well for me on that rotation. And then as the weeks go on, the 100-gram days can stretch into 3 or 4 days instead of 2, and so on and so on. And I think the longer we go with low carbs, the more we tap into fat stores and getting our skin thinner. And then in between there, sometimes I'll start doing some test runs and seeing what day does my body look best on what amount of carbs. So if the contest is on a Thursday, some master shows are on Thursday, some masters are on Saturdays, and for the Masters World, it's going to be on a Sunday. So I'll test the waters to see, okay, let me see what I look like after 3 days of 200 grams of carbs. All right, that's what I look like. Let me see what I look like on 300 grams of carbs. And I play around with it. I do all the test runs way before we talk about peak week and things like that. I make sure things are working. And I don't believe in a peak week. I don't like the word. I don't like the phrase.
Frank hates it. It's like Frank.
I'm right with you, Frankie.
Yeah.
So I use a lot of sea salt in my diet, and I drink a lot of water. And my skin is very, very tight, and I'm dry and I'm hard. When I'm about a week out from a show, I could walk on stage, and I learned that a long time ago. I manipulated stuff, and everything backfired. To look 10% better, I look 20% worse. So that when I did the Masters Pittsburgh Pro, I actually was at a gym a week before, and I can't remember Gary Camille out of a gym. He owns a gym down South Jersey, and he's been around a long time. Local guy, Fitness City in Manahawkin, New Jersey, and he said, "Why are you even going to change anything? Why don't you just walk on stage just the way you look?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, why not? Just walk on stage like this." And that was the first time I ever did it. I didn't manipulate anything. I just acted like it was the normal week. Like I acted like Saturday wasn't the contest. I acted like I'm not lowering my water. I'm not going to cut my salt. I walked on stage and I won both shows. I was dry, hard, and dense and grainy. And I'm like, this is the formula. And then I did one show where I think I did the Masters Baltimore Pro 2 years later. And I ended up winning the 50, 40, and the 35, all three. and 2 weeks later was the Hurricane Pro. And I said, well, for shits and giggles, I'm gonna do this peak week thing again and try it. And I carb depleted, I carved up, cut my water, and I barely won the over 50, and I took a third in the over 40. And I'm like, I'll never do that again. So I try to keep things simple.
I want to make a comment here because it's germane to the overriding theme of everything we probably discuss here, is that Vinny has, during the course of this interview, 20 times said, "This is what works for me. Right. This is what I do. This is what I've," in other words, he has experimented. Instead of saying, does ML12P3 work? You got to figure it out for yourself. And that's what Vinny's been saying here. This is what works for me. And that is what everybody's got to do. You got to figure out what works for you, because what works for him is not going to work for you, or maybe it will, but you're never going to know until you try it. So you've got to create your own system of evaluation and testing, or testing and evaluation, and to figure out what works for you. And Vinny has absolutely exemplified that, during the course of this conversation, because it's the most vitally important thing that you could possibly do is learn from what you're doing. And if you don't, you're just wasting your time.
But can I ask you guys, this is for all of you though. I think this is important, and it piggybacks on what John just said, just knowing what works for you. But because you guys know so many people and there's so many, resources that you have, who do you go to for advice? Because there's times where I'm sure you're bouncing ideas off people. Who do you reach out to?
Nobody. I don't go into nobody. Like, honestly, because if it was early in my career, I'd go to Steve Weinberger. But it's a decades and decades of sitting and listening. Like, I was privy to 30 years of competitors, top Olympia competitors in Steve's gym, talking about training and what they do nutritional wise, and just listening and doing all these interviews and getting with top influencers and people. And some of it's complete horse shit and some of it's good, but you have to apply it to yourself. It's not gospel. You try it, you see if it works. It's trial and error. Like what Vinny just said resonated with me. It was interesting. It's like, he was saying there's 100, then he goes to 300, and he goes to 4. Funny, because if I'm getting ready for something, I'll do 3-2-1, 3-2-1, 400. So it's just crazy how we're very similar, but that's what works for me. That's what works for him. For me to say, "Oh, Vinny, you know what? You should really go 3-2-1." He has a body of work in trial and error and experience of why that works for him. So for a coach to come in or somebody to come in and say, "Nah, I don't know, man. You should really pump that number up and do this." You don't know my body. Vinny knows his body the best out of anybody. Right. So anybody could come in and give him information. So I think you take information out. You don't have an ego. You take it. You apply half of it. You apply some of it, but you have to try it to see if it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. So do you guys feel the same? Because when I ask, because there's times where I have an idea of what I think I need to do, but also there's times where I second guess myself and I say, maybe I'm off here. Maybe I do need to go heavier, lighter, or do something different. That's when I start to bounce ideas, and I bounce ideas off everybody here. There's other folks I do as well, but that's why I ask, because I'm always curious who people, kind of brainstorm with, we'll say.
I have a friend down in Florida, Scott Applebaum. And he's 60 years old, and he turned pro this year at the NBC Universe. And he's somebody that I bounce ideas off of. We would talk, like when I was coming back, I had the muscle mind connection of how to train my chest was not there, because every time I did something, I could feel the anchors in my shoulders, and how do I activate my chest? So I would ask a lot of questions and try to get ideas and stuff. I think it's the day you think you know it all is the day you think the day you stop learning. But Definitely. You have to put things in perspective. You have to say, well, who am I going to ask advice from? And if you're in a room, if the four of us are together, and we're talking, like Frank said, Frank's not going to tell me what to do because he knows that I know my body, and I'm not going to tell Frank what to do. But if you're in a room with 2 other up and coming guys that only been in the sport for a year or two, they're gonna almost like scream to the heavens of like what we should do, and not see what we've accomplished. They wouldn't care what we accomplished because they want to get their information out. I think you have to be open-minded to learning. I've been doing this for a million years, and it was frustrating getting back into the gym and learning how to. I had to learn how to train again. That was the biggest thing. And I'm not the same guy. I think differently. I think about the things I did when I was younger, kind of embarrassing sometimes, in the sport. And now I approach things differently. I'm more open and cautious of how I approach people. I approach the gym differently, and I try to have patience with myself. I think it's the most important thing, having patience with myself. And having patience with myself has gotten me through the day. Having patience with myself has gotten me through the gym, and so on and so on, right? But learning is all about being open to people who know more than you. There's always somebody who knows more than you. It's like I go back to saying I learned from Charles Poliquin and my friend Scott Applebaum, and then just some people who aren't even in the industry who are smart in business and like, hey, listen, I used to be attached to Universal Nutrition, and now I used to do this and that. And I got into the magazines. I went out to California, did photo shoots. Those things aren't happening for me. So I got to look at this as a different business now. Like, what can I bring to the table on social media, and having a voice for the guys who are over 40 now. And, listen, it's all a cycle. It really what it boils down to.
It's funny, Jack. I was researching. I don't know what it was, probably Muscle Fitness. Or I saw a wellness competitors how to build like glutes, and her glutes are insane, right? So I'm like, wow. I applied like 2 or 3 of those exercises to my my routine, and my ass got much bigger. Like I was like, wow, like I never did that before. So like you do take the information. Like I never did a hip thrust in my life, and I'm like, wow, let me try this, and like and split squats and stuff, and I'm like, wow, over 50, and I my glutes are like 2 inches bigger. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. So Vinny's right. Have an ego. Look, if you guys don't ignore the glutes, because as you get older, you're just going to have a straight back and a crack. That's all you're going to have. And your ass is going to look like a chewed up piece of bubble gum as you get older. So you got to squat. You got to do stiff-legged deadlifts. You got to do hip thrusts, kickbacks and stuff. You got to start changing and evolving. And that's what this entire Korean fitness is evolving.
Yeah. I remember one day I was in a gym, Sean Clarita was training, and he was doing hip thrust. And I go, hip thrust? He's like, yeah, because I learned it from a Brazilian wellness girl.
See?
Like, oh, shit.
I got no shame in my game. It worked.
Well, look, this was offer up. And so, Vinny, we can, where you want to just tell us where we can find you, even though it's written on the bottom of the screen, because that's good, because we don't want to send people to the account that got hacked. Vinny got hacked.
No. Yeah, so I am at Vinny Galanti _ on Instagram, and Vinny Galanti on Facebook for anyone over the age of 50.
And mastersmuscle.com is your website, correct?
Yeah, and I also on Instagram I have Masters Muscle podcast.
Okay.
So I have that too. So yeah, anybody would love to get you guys on there too, interview.
Sure.
Well, listen,
I'd love to.
You're the boss. That'd be great.
Yep.
Cool. Well, listen, thanks. There was a lot of comments today. Thank you guys. That was really cool. A lot of various questions. And thanks, Vinny. Thanks for being so open and for being willing to to just talk about pretty much everything. It was awesome. And thanks, Frank, for setting it up, man, as always.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vinny. You guys, Frank, I appreciate you. I'm this is excellent. I'm excited with this. So thank you so much.
You got it, man. Cool.
It was great having you, Vinny.
Yeah.
We'll have you back closer to the show too.
Yeah, for sure. Then you can show Natalia your abs.
Yeah, I was gonna say Natalia. I was gonna say Then we can ask her to take some more clothing off.
No, I'm gonna train with Natalia. Does she get to see in person?
There you go.
Awesome.
There you go.
All right, everybody, have a good, safe weekend, and we'll be back Tuesday at 10 Eastern. And that's it. Bye, everybody.
All right, guys.
Take care.